Welcome to DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the sports capital, where we shine a light on local stories from the District, Maryland, and Virginia to inform, enlighten, and inspire you. I'm Barbara Britt, and my guest today is Lisa LaFontaine. She's the president and CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. And I just want to thank you so much for joining me today. Now, that's a combination of two well-known organizations, isn't it?
That's right. Actually, three well-known organizations. Okay. So we've been through two mergers in the last 3.5 years. So the first combination was bringing together the Washington Humane Society, which is celebrating its 150th anniversary this year.
Wow.
And the Washington Animal Rescue League. And when we did that, we became the only city in America that had all of its animal welfare under one roof.
What a great idea.
Yeah. And then we saw so many benefits from that merger that last year we merged with St. Hubert's Animal Welfare Center in New Jersey. And it really has allowed us to expand our footprint regionally and help significantly more animals and people.
And that's really the main heart of what you're trying to do.
That's what it's all about.
Animals.
Yeah, and people.
And people.
Yes.
Not just animals. And we're not just talking dogs and cats. We're talking...
No, I think one of the things that really struck me in my first couple of years here is that D.C. is 18% green space, right? And it's protected green space. And so a tremendous proportion of our calls are about wildlife who have gotten themselves into trouble or who are in conflict with people in some way. So we see dogs and cats and small animals and deer and possum. And then because we work with MPD and the district around other unusual cases, we have seen emus and alligators and bears. And I think any animal you could name, we have served or cared for in some way.
I know there was a Facebook feed not too long ago that somebody thought it was a mountain lion. Mm-hmm. I think it turned out to be a very large cat that somebody let out at night. It wasn't a mountain lion, but on some of those cameras, boy, that thing sure looked the part.
That one was a cat, but we are doing a project right now called the DC Cat Count with the Smithsonian and a bunch of other groups to actually count all the cats in DC, indoors and out. And one of the things that it involves is putting cameras out to catch what's going on in our wild spaces at night. And we found the first mountain lion who's been seen in the district in November.
Wow, that's amazing. Mm-hmm. That is truly amazing. And so I know that you have a whole host of programs, and I do want to let, especially since you have had the merger, but really, you, as you said, you advocate for people as well, but you advocate for animals. And give us some examples of how that happens.
Well, we are, I think people think of us mostly as an adoption center, which we certainly are, and that's a hugely important part of what we do. But we are really a complex organization that is part veterinary hospital, part police force, part social services group for people as well as animals, part adoption agency. So it is complex and broad. And I think that probably the thing that we're known for outside of adoptions is the humane law enforcement work we do, where we investigate cases of cruelty or neglect.
And so that's one of those things where as you're walking through areas, is it strictly in the city or does it go into the suburbs yet?
So for us, we have a very unique authority that comes from a congressional charter back when D.C. was a federal city. And people first started noticing cruelty to animals, and it was primarily carriage horses at the time. And so we were convened as a body to protect animals from cruelty and neglect. And so we've been doing it for 150 years, and the way we do it hasn't changed all that much. And what is also very different is that we work with the U.S. Attorney's Office when we prosecute a case.
Wow.
Yeah. And I think the really unique thing about our officers is they are almost every type of officer rolled into one. When we get a call about cruelty, our officer is the one that gets the search warrant, writes the search warrant, gets the search warrant, conducts the investigation, does the forensic work, and then prepares the case with the U.S. attorney. So they're really there from the moment of the first call to the verdict in court, and that's unique.
That is very unique. And are there times when the cruelty that's visible, the visible cruelty to the animal, may be indicative of other things that are happening in the home?
Almost always. And we have ended up writing search warrants in such a way that the person got arrested for violence to their partner as well as violence to the animal. And sometimes we're the leading edge on that. Sometimes we see it first. The district is a pretty progressive place for animals and has really great laws. And one of the laws calls for us to cross-report. So if police or fire department see any potential cruelty to animals, they're mandated to call us, and the same for us if we see anything with people.
And that's interesting because I know just from being in the news business for a really, really long time that there have been studies that show that if somebody is cruel to an animal, there's certainly, I mean, most of us can't even watch. You see the ads on TV for something and there's an animal freezing in the cold and most people are just horrified. And there is something when somebody can hurt an animal, and that really just brings out something very protective in people, doesn't it?
I think that's right. And we had a case this year, Ken, a dog who we found who had severe lacerations on all 4 of her feet. We were able to get video cameras from the location where she was found and see that she was thrown out of a car and beaten and left in the parking lot. And because we had that video camera, we were able to publicize the video and offer a reward. And we got a lead that led us to the person who beat her very severely, and found out that he was also being cruel to beating his partner. And so he was arrested for cruelty to animals and domestic violence. Luckily, Ken, we thought she was going to lose 1 or more of her legs because the lacerations were so bad, but she rushed back to our hospital. Our staff took good care of her over several months, and she's now in a loving home.
Oh, I'm so happy. Thank you for giving us the happy ending.
Yeah, we have a lot of happy endings.
Holding my breath on that. So you do advocate for animals. There is, I mean, this is the place if you're walking down the street and you see something, you go, there's snow on the ground, there's an animal tied up outside, doesn't look good.
Right.
Are you all the people to call?
We are absolutely the people to call. If an animal looks too thin, if you don't like the way someone's treating their animal, you just need to give us a call, and we will follow up. We had almost 2,000 calls like that last year, and that's pretty typical for us, about 2,000 a year. And I would say that, probably 85% of the cases where we're called out, it's not abuse, it's more neglect. And we can help folks. We can help them know what to do, how to build a fence that contains their pet, how to build housing so that they can be warm. And those neglect issues really respond to education. But abuse is generally from a mental illness, and that cuts across demographics. You see it in all parts of our city, any income range, any demographic, and those are the ones that we prosecute.
I understand. I also know that you all have programs to support people who want to keep their animal. Maybe they're struggling to feed their family. They also have an animal. Of course, you consider it part of your family. You don't want to have to make that choice. How do you help folks in that situation?
Last year, we gave out 40,000 pounds of food to people who were having to make choices about whether to feed themselves and their children or their pet. And we just want to take that fear off the table for people. Actually, there was a big hit a couple of years ago when we had the government shut down. And we were able to get tons of donated food that we were able to give out to people so that they could know that that was taken care of. And the nice thing about that is that some people are caught in really entrenched poverty, and some people just fall on temporary hard times. And we're there for both. But we also offer affordable medical care for people who might have to give their pet up because they can't afford traditional vet costs. And, that animal is bonded to the family. They're loved. They have a home. There's no reason for us to make them homeless by taking them in. So we would much rather provide medical care, just simple services that allow that bond to stay unbroken.
And I know that you offer weekly low-cost vaccines right here in the District of Columbia. I mean, that So really it does, there's no reason that you have to be separated from your animal because of those reasons.
We offer weekly, 3 times a week, we have vaccine clinics. It's not unusual for us to have 100 people show up with multiple pets to get just the basic vaccines. And that is such an important, it's such an important threshold to cross to just give your pet basic health care. Because it prevents a lot of things down the line and it keeps things from getting worse. And, one of the things we're seeing nationally is more and more cruelty cases are coming from a lack of medical care because someone couldn't do something or tried to do it themselves and then it progressed and they got embarrassed and it just snowballed. So if we can just focus on basic care, it's inexpensive, it's smart, it's helpful, and it allows people to live happier with their pets.
That is awesome. And the same with the spay and neuter services that you have as well.
That's right. We offer low-cost spay and neuter services so that we can help do our part to stem the overpopulation problem in D.C. And really, we've been doing a lot of spay and neuter since 2007 when we opened our first situated clinic in the Capitol Riverfront area. That has been closed and moved to our Oglethorpe office since then. But we are starting to see a decline in overpopulation, so it's having an impact.
That is encouraging because everywhere else that is not necessarily the case.
No, especially, we're seeing that in the Pacific Northwest, in the Northeast, and in generally either college towns or cities that have a lot of technology support, more spay-neuter has taken off. But if you're not in one of those areas, overpopulation is rampant and perfectly adoptable animals are losing their lives every day because there aren't enough homes. And I think that's one of the reasons we did the merger with St. Hubert's. They have an amazing program where they bring animals from as far south as Texas all the way to Puerto Rico, up north to our facilities in New Jersey. And we adopt some out there, and we also send them up north from Toronto to Maine, where there are loving homes awaiting them. And that's really the program of the future, is logistically trying to connect those communities with overpopulation with those who have loving homes.
And yet at the heart of overpopulation is this necessity to have animals fixed, as we used to say in the old days. And what's the resistance there?
I think that the biggest resistance is usually economic. People just can't afford it. And then I think there are cultural reasons that people don't want to spay and neuter their pets. If you live in a community where you see a lot of unsterilized males walking around, you get used to that. That just becomes how it is. And so a lot of times it's just awareness. So I would say awareness, culture, and economic are the 3 issues.
The other thing I noticed that you provide is really how to instill kindness in young people. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that program.
We have a wonderful humane education program that brings kids in all throughout the year. We do some very intensive camps in the summer and on vacations where kids can come and learn how to be humane. And we find that kids talk to their parents a lot. We tell them how to make calls if they see something they don't like, and it is not unusual for them to call one of our humane educators. And the nice thing is we have the animal control contract with the District of Columbia. And so we have many animal control officers they're different from our humane law enforcement officers in that they're more community policemen who are out rescuing animals who've gotten into distress, picking up lost animals, and they come a lot to our classes. And, the kids want to be them when they grow up. And so creating that relationship where they can ask an officer, what do you do? Oh, my goodness. We have great stories to tell the kids. A few months ago, a kitten fell into the subway metro tracks, and we were able to get them to shut down the metro and rescue the kitten. We had a duckling who had gotten separated from her mom and her family down in the canal and was treading water and couldn't get through the locks. And so our officers jumped down and got her and reunited her with, or sent her to City Wildlife where she was rehabilitated. And the kids love those stories, and they want to be that person when they grow up.
I think we all love that. There was just a case, I think it was DC Fire, and there had been a fire in a home, a townhome, and then you have these big, huge firefighters with all their gear, and they rescued these precious little kittens. It was
actually
the cutest picture.
That was right around Christmas, and that was Aris, who's one of our newest animal control officers. It was he'd been with us for I think 3 years, and his aspiration was to be an animal control officer. He finally was promoted after many other successful jobs at HRA, and in one of his first gigs alone, he rescued a bunch of kittens in a fire, and he got himself in the Washington Post. It was fantastic.
Just wonderful. My guest today is Lisa LaFontaine. She's the president and CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. She's telling us these wonderful stories that they don't always end well, but a lot of them do. I know that you do have these animal control officers who go out. I mean, I'm thinking of the old Disney movies where they're in the white truck and they're the bad guys. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Where they come in.
Right.
But that's not really the case. But when people, again, you were talking about that we live now in conflict with wildlife. You see that certainly in the suburbs. I know people get frustrated because they'll plant a garden and the deer come and eat it, or they have to shut down some of our parks periodically because they do some thinning of the herd, as it were. But tell us about the best in a perfect world. How would that happen? How would you resolve the conflicts that we have simply by living in a shared space?
Well, I think your point is so right on, that in the old days the officer was seen as someone in a white vehicle who showed up and confiscated animals. And so we have tried to, and I think successfully combated that in so many ways. I mean, if you see one of our animal control vehicles, they're joyful to look at. They have happy animals on them, cats, dogs. You see it and you just smile if you're next to it in traffic. And then our officers are incredibly well trained to really collaborate with the community. And so if they're not on a call, they might just stop by a local dog park and just talk to people and just say, you having any issues, anything we can help you with. We go to ANC, Advisory Neighborhood Commission meetings, just to tell stories and share experiences. And so we really focus on having our officers be helpers. And I think that maybe one of the times it really turned the corner for us is when we started to not just trap, neuter, and return outdoor cats to caregivers who were caring for those cats, but when we would pick up a cat that was stray in a neighborhood and we could see that cat was living very well. She was healthy, her coat was good, her body condition was good. So we knew she was being cared for by a community. And in the old days, that cat would just be picked up and either euthanized or we would try to make her adoptable. But you're taking a cat who's lived outside and doesn't really want to be in a home and doesn't really want to cuddle with people. And back around 2013, we started returning those cats to the neighborhood. We would pick them up. We would give them tests to make sure they were healthy. Most of the time they were. We would give them vaccines and spay and neuter them, and then do just a little clip on their ear to indicate that they had had that care. And then we would show up that night with the cat. And oftentimes it might be an officer who was talking to people afterward and putting flyers on the door to say that there was a cat there. And then it became a happy thing, right? This cat that everybody thought was just the one they were caring for, but they found out that their neighbor and the other neighbors were all caring for it too. And maybe the cat has 5 names, but we show up at the day with a well cared for animal, and the whole community comes out to welcome that cat. And those kind of things turn the tide, so that the old cop stereotype goes out the window, and it's really the helper and the people you want to be like.
Now tell us about some of the opportunities that you have for people who are living, in a small space. They're living in an apartment, and that you help them understand what does it mean to have a pet in a small area. How do you best manage that?
I think we really approach every adoption like matchmaking. I mean, we've been like the in-person Match.com before there was a Match.com. and people find their pets in as many different ways as there are people. Some people find a pet online that they fall in love with, and they want to come visit and adopt. Oftentimes that doesn't work out because we have such a high adoption rate. I mean, 94% of the animals in our entire organization are adopted, and they move quickly. The average length of stay is only 6 days.
That's good news.
So who you see on the web might not be there in person. So we encourage people to come in person too. But some people find their pet online. Some people come in the shelter absolutely sure that they want a female beagle, but then they see another mix before they get to that beagle who steals their heart. And some people kind of start with what the pet looks like. Others couldn't care less what it looks like. They want to make sure that the energy level is right. Some people say, come give me your biggest project. And so you get any answer in a day. And so what we really try to do is have a conversation and make sure we're telling people everything we know about that animal. The good side and the challenging side, medically and behaviorally, so that they can make a really informed decision. I mean, people research the kind of car they're going to get for months, and this is going to live in your bed for 18 years. So we try to get all that research out in the adoption conversation, so that people really think about lifestyle and energy level, and is the pet going to give them what they want? Do they want a cuddler? Do they just want one that's going to be around? It's complicated.
They want somebody to get them outside to take their walk every day.
Get them outside and help get a few pounds off. That happens too sometimes.
That is fantastic. And I'm so happy that you have such a high turnover rate. That is amazing.
Yeah, when I arrived in the district, we were only adopting out 28% of the animals.
Wow.
And so we have put a lot of programs in place over the last 10 years to completely turn that number inside out.
Is some of that the fact that animals can be viewed online? Is that part of it, or is there a whole host of things that are invisible to us, but that you all have worked hard on?
There are probably 12 different things that we've done, from creating foster homes. I think that was a big one. Our facilities are limited, right? The capacity is limited. And so one thing we did is invest in finding and supporting people and families who would like to take a shelter pet in and let them live in their house until they get adopted. And we have nearly 500 foster homes throughout the area. And what that means is we have a virtual shelter, right? We have 2 shelters in the district, but we have a virtual shelter of foster homes where pets are growing up all over the community. And those families feed them, they love them, they train them. More often than not, they find their adoptive home. Sometimes if you're me, you fail, and all three of my pets were foster pets at one time, and we have that happen a lot. But I think building that foster capacity and really seeing that animals don't have to be sheltered in our care in order to be sheltered was the biggest thing.
And obviously fostering requires a huge commitment, and I'm sure you train them. How
Not necessarily. Really? Because so this year we have added a few different programs to the foster program, because that was an issue. A lot of people just couldn't take an animal in for 3 to 8 weeks. So we have introduced 2 programs, one of which is called In Real Life, where you can just take an animal for the weekend or for Thanksgiving or just to get them out of the shelter. And then we have happy hours where people just come and get a dog and take them on a walk around DC or bring them for a ride in the car. So fostering can be just a couple-hour commitment.
That's amazing. And I know that there have been studies. Of course, I don't have the data in front of me, just what it does for the human. Yes, for the animal side, I'm sure as well. But for the human side, for our blood pressure,
right,
for our stress level, and I was
right,
circling back to the kids, there's something very unique about that interchange between pet, between an animal and a human, that just seems to do both sides some good.
Well, that's actually how I got into this work. I was in the corporate world for the first part of my career as a communications and marketing director for a financial services company. And my daughter, when she was about 9 years old, started to show symptoms of what turned out to be Tourette's syndrome, which is a neurological disorder that causes tics, that causes obsessive compulsive behaviors, and a whole host of things. And we had just gotten married. We were a blended family. I brought a daughter, my husband brought a son, and we had gone to the local shelter and gotten 2 cats. And one of the cats was a very normal social cat. The other one, I found out later, had been a barn cat. So he was unsocial. He had never lived in the house. And he was just different. He didn't want to interact with us. He didn't want to be cuddled. But my daughter loved him. And she would have these OCD rituals that would go on for sometimes 8 hours. And I brought her to a therapist who just looked at her and said, when the bully's trying to make you do something, what makes you feel better? And she said, Merlin, who's our cat. And she said, well, maybe Merlin will sleep with you so you don't have these rituals every night for 8 hours. And my daughter loved that. But I cried all the way home because this cat wouldn't let us touch him. So I thought, now my life is, our lives are just totally upside down now. But that night, for the first time, the cat let me pick him up. And after that, he was still the same little feisty guy during the day, but at night he slept with her. And there was something about the purring that relieved the obsessive compulsive thoughts and eased her and allowed her to sleep. And then as time went on, she didn't want to move. She didn't want to have physical tics because she was afraid he would leave the bed. So she learned to control her tics. And that's what a person with Tourette's has to do. So I thought I had adopted the most amazing cat who had ever been born. And I went out to all my friends as an evangelical talking about my cat. And I found out everybody had a story like that who had a pet. Everybody who had a pet had been helped through a divorce, a death, a heartbreak, a lost job, any kind of pain you could imagine. And then I just started seeing the human-animal bond everywhere. And that's really what got me into this work. And I think that's why we focus on people, too, because they give us so much. They do so much for us. They're so kind and loving and forgiving, and they bring out the best not only in us, but in communities.
It is true. And the quickest way, if you're moving somewhere, you want to meet folks, and just take your critter outside for a walk or in the yard or whatever, and you will soon meet. That's how I've met almost all my neighbors.
Yes. And the other thing is that animals build trust. They're social lubricants. They bring people together who wouldn't otherwise talk to each other. I mean, we saw that with the cats that we would bring back to the community. And we see it just in a dog park. I mean, the intimacy of exchanges people have without knowing each other's name because they trust each other because the dogs are there.
That is just amazing. I don't want to run out of time, and our time always goes so quickly. I'm speaking today with Lisa LaFontaine. She's president and CEO of the Humane Rescue Alliance. And if you want more information, there's just a whole host of programs. There's adoptable animals that you can look at online. But as Lisa told us, you better hustle up. But all kinds of wonderful, wonderful programs that you can be involved in or just get information about. And that's humanerescuealliance.org. You can donate, you can volunteer, you can foster, and you also have some really fun events.
We have great events.
I know that the big one is the second annual Meow DC. That's Saturday, May 30th at Dock 5 at Union Market. What happens there?
That is, you've heard probably the expression cat people. Well, we want a place for cat people to come together and celebrate. And so we have all sorts of activities. We have seminars where people can actually learn a lot of things about cats or working with cats at the Humane Rescue Alliance. We have vendors who have amazing, amazing products. We have experts on hand to answer questions about cats. And you can put your cat ears on and get a little crazy that day.
That sounds fun. It's billed as fantastic feline fun.
Absolutely.
So you have to have a great time at that. And then, as I mentioned, there's a seminar called Apartment Living with Dogs. Mm-hmm. That's on the 22nd. Mm-hmm. And where do they have that? Is that at the Oglethorpe facility?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, in Northwest. And then there's another event on the 29th of this month, Pasta for Pets.
Yes.
At Eastern Market. That's hilarious.
That has a cult following, actually. I mean, you got to get your tickets quickly to go to that. It is a blast, and it's a combination of pasta and bingo. And people have been coming for years. They bring their kids, they bring their family. So join us, but get your tickets soon.
That sounds like so much fun. I want to thank you so much for joining me
Barbara.
today. I've been speaking with Lisa LaFontaine with the Humane Rescue Alliance.org to get all the information. Thanks for joining me on DMV Spotlight on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.
Thank you so much, and thank you for rescuing a pet recently, too.
I hope so. And I want to thank my engineer, Ken Hunter. I'm Barbara Britt on ESPN 630, the Sports Capital.